our last and most awaited speaker for today's session, Rashee Mehra. She's a senior associate of academics and research at the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. She has received a master's degree in urbanization and development from the London School of Economics. Rashee's research is focused on the issues of inequalities and activism, urban planning, informal work, social protection, and gender. At IIHS, she works on creating research on social movements to support the work of activists and especially practitioners who engage with marginalized urban geographers. And I think that is really fascinating. So furthermore, she anchors a city-level campaign on making the next Delhi master plan more inclusive for populations which are usually left out of conventional planning. She's also working on a study supported by International Labour Organization to understand paid and unpaid domestic work in urban context of India. Previously, Rashee has also worked in informal settlements and resettlement colonies of Delhi and Bihar for over 10 years. Her new work aims to bridge the gap between practice and research on urban issues in India. And we are fortunate and we are very grateful to have Rashee present her research and expertise with us today. The title of her talk is going to be Urban Development in the Time of a Pandemic. Over to you, Rashee. Thank you, dear.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to jump quickly into my presentation because there isn't enough time and I have lots to share. So I'll be sharing about Main Delhi, which is a campaign which started in 2018 to make the Delhi Master Plan, which is coming up in 2021, more inclusive. And the campaign has many people that are part of it. So there are civil society organizations, there are activists, there are researchers, and individuals who work on issues of informality in livelihoods, in housing, in gender, and other areas. So the question that the campaign really tries to ask is, planning is for whom? You know, planning, urban planning, both as a discipline of study and as a practice, is deeply exclusionary. I mean, there's been tons written on how master plans fail in cities like Delhi, in cities across South Asia. And the focus of our campaign was really sort of bridging this very formal sort of way of looking at city design from the informal, which is the complete opposite of what urban planning stands for. So the focus of the campaign really is on informal livelihoods, on informal housing, on gender, and of course climate change and sustainability, coming that Delhi is one of the most polluted cities in the world in terms of air quality. We also have one of the most polluted rivers in the world, the Yamuna. I'd want you to look at my a wonderful sort of poster that I've shared, which was from our campaign, where within research from our campaign, from other partners, we found that housing in Delhi, informal housing, also called slums and bastis, occupy only 0.6% of Delhi's land, whereas 2% of Delhi's land is under parked cars. So these were the kind of logics that we were trying to sort of understand and unlearn when it comes to urban planning in the city. So, like I said, we wanted to challenge the formal logics of the city, of urban planning, and we wanted to move beyond merely tokenistic representations, because it seems like the way currently the city is being planned, it seems like they're only planning for an able-bodied man who's young. So, we wanted to sort of put in, experiences, the lived realities of a majority of the city which get left out. So when we said gender and we said that, it has to be safe for women, we wanted to also go into, not just looking at women's experiences in the city, but because women are not a heteronormative, homogeneous group, and they have different experiences of how they sort of navigate the city. We also wanted to include sexual minorities and transgenders and really question this, millennial development agenda of world-class city making, where it was being reduced. Our master plans were really reducing how our city was getting shaped to mere aesthetics, and they were being ruled by that. So our focus really within the campaign was on how to make the city more inclusive, and that kind of city is more, instead of just merely a world-class city. And as the campaign has been going on since 2018, in the last 4 months, we've of course had the challenge, all of us globally, of the pandemic, of the coronavirus pandemic in the city. And that really brought forward what we were saying in our campaign, when we were saying that we have to focus on informal livelihoods, we have to focus on rental, on housing precarity that many citizens in the city face. How do we that kind of came suddenly, these really marginalized topics, these really invisible populations suddenly have taken center stage in the last 4 months. We've had massive migration out of the city to rural areas because in India, the government imposed a very severe lockdown, a very severe curfew. Many migrants had started walking back home, walking 400 kilometers, walking 800 kilometers, some of them dying on the way, all of them suffering as they undertook this journey, really reminiscent to many of us, who were lucky enough to live in homes and we didn't have to leave, really reminiscent of, images from the partition of India in 1947. And this kind of migrant crisis is what we are right now really in the middle of. There's massive food insecurity in the city. There are many food insecure families. There's, of course, health insecurity, because how do we talk about health and sanitation in an informal settlement which is underserved, which does not have tapped water? So suddenly these directives of the government on hand washing, and keeping things clean, or social distancing in such dense built up, were really falling through the cracks. So a majority of the citizens just do not have access to, such luxuries. Literally became these, have a functioning toilet became a luxury. To be able to wash hands when one wanted to became a luxury. To be able to go out and not go out because your work depended on it became a luxury. So these really sort of visibilized what we had been saying in the campaign, really brought many of these tensions on center stage. And so going back to what we had been talking about within the campaign, what can a people's urban plan look like? Because now we know that our cities really do not have the built infrastructure or the social infrastructure to handle a pandemic and corona, and which is a challenge for us immediately. But in the long term, we are also looking at, climate change issues of, and other such crises. So how resilient are our cities? And when I say Delhi, there have been similar experiences in Mumbai, in Chennai, in Calcutta. I'm sure it's the same experience in Karachi, in other South Asian cities, in Dhaka, where if lockdowns were imposed and they were that serious, these cracks became very apparent. And so we want to sort of kind of speak about what can a people's plan look like, which is what maybe Delhi had been focusing on all this while. But now some of this is becoming, like I said, incredibly visible for policymakers and urban planners to kind of assess and see. One of them is migrant housing, and situation of COVID also to have, isolation wards or information on how to best deal with this pandemic in a multi-purpose center. And that's something that we're proposing to the National Institute of Urban Affairs to kind of make sure that these come up at neighborhood levels. The last is, of course, I want to focus on street vendors, because we are also going to look at Delhi has to prepare. We were unprepared for a mass migration out of the city, but we do have a chance now to prepare for a reverse migration into the cities, because the rural economy of India cannot absorb that many workers going in. So we will eventually see people coming back into the city for work, for their livelihood. And they've had such a difficult experience And one of the easiest sort of informal employments to get into is street vending. It's low on sort of investment and you can go and do it. But there is here also the street vendors are going to have to renegotiate public space, because Corona has marked so sharply what a public space looks like. So a post-pandemic public space where you have to have social distancing, where you have to have, you have to sanitize, where you have to think of health and hygiene, have masks, etc., have protective equipment as you're vending. And also would have to be something that the government would have to invest in so that livelihoods can be restored, because what we are seeing right now is a complete destruction of our informal economy. And in India, and I think in South Asian cities at large, we have to remember that a majority of our adult population works in the informal sector. So in India, the numbers are at 90%. So we will be looking at these challenges that are coming up, but to look at them from a planning perspective, where at least spatially, the city is ready to deal with some of these crises that have come up. It's Corona today, it's going to be something else tomorrow. And how can we make these cities resilient, really? So that's what I want to leave you with. And I have shared some resources here, and I'm very happy to kind of leave them with you. We've got, our website is up and running. We've got lots and lots of fact sheets on different livelihoods and different informal housing, and how we've kind of used these as advocacy tools to kind of, really speak to the people who are making the plans. So really asking the planners to come and actually see how majority of the city lives before we start making plans that really don't work, and move towards a plan in the next 20 years for an inclusive city, which Delhi, we hope, can become. So yeah, that's it.